Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, Chapter 13, Number 1. How to Turn Crisis into a Creative Opportunity. I know a young golfer who holds the all-time course record for his own home course, yet has never even placed in a really big tournament. When playing by himself or with his friends in small tournaments where the stakes are low, his play is flawless. Yet each time he gets into a big tournament with his game deteriorates. In the language of golfdom, the pressure gets him. Yet many baseball pitchers have pinpoint control until they find themselves in a situation where the chips are down. Then they choke up, lose all control, and appear to have no ability whatever. On the other hand, many athletes perform better under pressure. The situation itself seems to give them more strength, more power, more finesse. People who come into their own in a crisis. For example, John Thomas, the record-breaking high jumper from Boston University, often performs better in competition than in practice. In February 1960, Thomas set a new world's record, clearing 7 feet 1 1/4 inches at the U.S. Indoor Championships. His highest previous jump in practice had been 6 feet 9 1/4. It isn't always the baseball player with the highest batting average who is called upon as a pinch hitter in a tough spot. The manager frequently turns down the man with the highest batting average for a player who is known to have come through in the clutch. One salesman may find himself inarticulate in the presence of an unimportant prospect. His skills desert him. Another salesman, under the same circumstance, may sell over his head. The challenge of the situation brings out abilities he does not ordinarily possess. Many women are charming and gracious when talking with one person or a small informal group, but become tongue-tied, awkward, and dull at a formal dinner or a big social occasion. On the other hand, I know a little lady who comes into her own only under the stimulus of a big occasion. If you had dinner with her alone, you would find her very ordinary. Her features are not particularly attractive. Her personality is somewhat on the drab side. Yet all this changes when she attends an important party. The stimulus of the occasion awakens and brings to life something within her. Her eyes acquire a new sparkle. Her conversation is witty and charming. Even her facial features seem to undergo a change, and you find yourself thinking of her as a beautiful woman. There are students who do extremely well in day-to-day classwork, but find their minds a blank when taking an examination. There are other students who are ordinary in classwork but do extremely well on important examinations. The secret of the money player. The difference between all these persons is not some inherent quality that one has and the other doesn't. It is largely a matter of how they learn to react to crisis situations. A crisis is a situation which can either make you or break you. If you react properly to the situation, a crisis can give you strength, power, wisdom you do not ordinarily possess. If you react improperly, a crisis can rob you of the skill, control, and ability that you ordinarily have to call upon. The so-called money player in sports, in business, or social activities, the person who comes through in the clutch, who performs better under the stimulus of challenge, is invariably the person who has learned either consciously or unconsciously to react well to crisis situations. In order to perform well in a crisis, we need to 1. Learn certain skills under conditions which we will not be overmotivated. We need to practice without pressure. 2. We need to learn to react to crisis with an aggressive rather than a defensive attitude, to respond to the challenge in the situation rather than to the menace, to keep our positive goal in mind. 3. We need to learn to evaluate so-called crisis situations in their true perspective, to not make mountains out of molehills, to react as if every small challenge were a matter of life or death. 1. Practice without pressure. Although we may learn fast, we do not learn well under crisis conditions. Throw a man who can't swim into water over his head, and the crisis itself may give him the power to swim to safety. He learns fast and manages to swim somehow, but he will never learn to become a championship swimmer. The crude, inept stroke that he used to rescue himself becomes fixed, and it is difficult for him to learn better ways of swimming. Because of his ineptness, he may perish in a real crisis where he is required to swim the long distance. Dr. Edward C. Tolman, psychologist and expert on animal behavior at the University of California, says that both animals and men form brain maps, or cognitive maps of the environment while they are learning. If the motivation is too intense, if there is not too much of a present crisis in the learning situation, these maps are broad and general. If the animal is overmotivated, the cognitive map is narrow and restricted. He learns just one way of solving this problem. In the future, if this one way happens to be blocked, the animal becomes frustrated and fails to discern alternative routes or detours. He develops a one response, cut and dried, preconceived, and tends to lose the ability to react spontaneously to a new situation. He cannot improvise. He can only follow a set plan. Pressure retards learning. Dr. Tolman found that if rats were permitted to learn and practice under non-crisis conditions, they, they, later, they later performed well in a crisis. For example, if rats were permitted to roam about at will and explore a maze when well fed and with plenty to drink, they did not appear to learn anything. However, if the same rats were placed in the maze while hungry, they showed they had learned a great deal by quickly and efficiently going to the goal. Hunger faced these strange rats with a crisis to which they reacted well. Other rats which were forced to learn the maze under the crisis of hunger and thirst did not do so well. They were overmotivated, and their brain maps became narrow. The one correct route to the goal became fixated. If this route were blocked, the rats became frustrated and had great difficulty learning a new one. The more intense the crisis situation under which you learn, the less you learn. Professor Jerome S. Bruner of Harvard University trained two groups of rats to solve the maze to get food. One group had not eaten for 12 hours and learned the maze in 6 trials. The second group, which had eaten nothing for 36 hours, required more than 20 tries. Fire drills teach crisis conduct in non-crisis situations. People react in the same way. People who have to learn how to get out of a burning building will normally require 2 or 3 times as long to learn the proper escape route as they would if no fire were present. Some of them do not learn at all. Overmotivation interferes with reasoning processes. The automatic reaction mechanism is jammed too much by conscious effort, trying too hard. Something akin to purpose tremor develops, and the ability to think clearly is lost. The ones who do manage to somehow get out of the building have learned a narrow, fixated response. Put them in a different building or change the circumstances slightly, and they react as badly as the second time around as the first. But you can take these same people, let them practice a dry run fire drill where there's no fire. Because there is no menace, there is no excessive negative feedback to interfere with clear thinking or correct doing. They practice filing out of the building calmly, efficiently, and correctly. After they have practiced this a number of times, they can be counted upon to act the same way when an actual fire breaks out. Their muscles, nerves, and brain have memorized a broad, general, flexible map. The attitude of calmness and clear thinking will carry over from practice drill to actual fire. Moreover, they will have learned something about how to get out of any building or cope with any changed circumstance. They are not committed to a rigid response, but will be able to improvise, to react spontaneously to whatever conditions may be present. The moral is obvious for either mice or men. Practice without pressure and you will learn more efficiently and be able to perform better in a crisis situation.